Logan Stanley is having the best season of his career. A contract year, 10 years in the making. It's still time for the Winnipeg Jets to trade Stanley to a true contender.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. We have a lot to chat about tonight. I want to talk a lot about Logan Stanley. I think that this is one of the biggest decision points in franchise history, in part because it'll show whether the Jets truly understand what it takes to move on, or if they are still stuck in the past. On a related note, Manitoba Moose not doing so hot. And when you look at the standings in the AHL and you look at where the Moose are relative to not only their own division, but other divisions, something is up with this team, and it might be a real detriment to Winnipeg's development pipeline. Finally, Winnipeg is going to be taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs on the weekend. And Toronto, another team that has been kind of all over the place, really struggling this season. Is there anything than beating the Leafs? Well, there would have been had the Jets not blown a big lead the last time they faced them, so maybe yes. We'll dive into all of that in just a brief moment, but before we do, wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, the Logan Stanley situation right now is very interesting. We're seeing a lot of people talking about it. John Shannon was on Winnipeg Sports Talk the other day, and was basically saying, the Jets have poured a decade of work into him. How can you abandon him? How can you let him go? He is the future. And I'm sorry, I just want to point that out. That's really funny to say. Stanley is 27, about to be 28 by the time his contract is up, and he has basically been a career seventh pairing defenseman. Now, he is having an offensive breakout this year. He's got, 15 points in 45-ish games right now. Several of those, about half of them are goals. It's been fun. It has been fun to see him do what, frankly, had the Jets understood what his game actually was years ago, he could have been doing this whole time. But the reality of Stanley is that defensively, he is still the same as he always has been, right? The pivoting is still a problem. He struggles to make D-zone exits consistently. He's gotten better at it in some ways, but the net is generally still pretty rough. The shot share and chances share is still not great. The expected goals, especially because of the chances he concedes, also not great. The only thing that's really popping this year is his overall offensive production. He is riding a massive shooting percentage heater. Now, some of his stuff I think is somewhat replicable. The goal scoring and stuff feels not necessarily unreasonable based on some of the ways that he's attacking the OZ, where he's kind of activating and jumping into the rush, all that stuff. It feels not impossible to repeat. But the problem for the Jets is if they re-sign Stanley, especially for the amount of money that has apparently been rumored, like we're talking $25 million potentially on the table for this guy. I mean, that's just insanity to me. Stanley potentially could bring in an absolute haul at this year's trade deadline. He is probably one of their most valuable trade assets right now. And all love and respect to Logan. He's an extremely hardworking player. He has been in this organization for many years and has really come a long way since his first draft days. But that does not mean that you have to commit long-term to him. The Jets, quite frankly, need to move on and move in a new direction. And I think this, for me, is one of the biggest litmus tests to understand if the Jets front office has any concept of why they're stuck where they are. This team has made a lot of commitments to many players, some of which are better than others, right? I was fine with Scheifele, Hellebuck, and Connor coming back. KFC probably could have netted you a massive trade haul to maybe start your core rebuild a little bit faster, but, for a lot of reasons, the Jets would never do that. Totally understandable. The Pionk contract, a lot less defensible. 7 years, $7 million? I mean, it might be more like 6 years. It's just a boatload of money, right? $7 million per season is a lot of money. And, any amount of term on that deal, whether it was 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, it was going to be too much. And, Pionk really only functions alongside Sandberg. But okay, fine, right? You can live with that, right? Every team is going to have a contract or two that's less than optimal. The Jets have generally been smart with a lot of their depth contracts, in the $3 to $4 million range for guys like Niederreiter, Iafallo. The Velarde contract at $7 million, very, very good. I think that's fine. The Perfetti deal we'll have to wait and see, right? That's a little bit of an outstanding question. And bridging Sandberg in a way also for me has some real risks. But the Jets have really just kicked the can down the road to the same season that Morrissey is also due for extension. So really, really big questions in about 3 years for what this defense is going to look like. But the Jets cannot make the same mistake with Stanley. Logan is still what he is, right? He's basically, a depth defenseman, probably a 6 or 7. And if they ask him to come back on a 5-year deal or something crazy, they are making one of the biggest franchise mistakes they could possibly make. Stanley is what he is, right? He's a third pairing guy at best. Defensively, still porous. Offensively, you're really banking on this season being his norm, and I'm still not convinced it is. I think it's been more fun, and you see moments where you're like, maybe they should have just played him as a winger his whole career, but he could potentially get you maybe a second round pick, maybe higher this year. That could be an absolute coup for this team that frankly needs high end talent to come back into this prospect pool. The Jets have lots of depth prospects. They've got a couple of guys who could be higher end, but we don't really know for sure. Like Kieran Walton still has a couple of things in his game to where you may have a question or two about his overall ceiling. He looks like he's on the right path, but he's not a guarantee. Braden Yeager, also not a guarantee. I still am pretty high on him being a really good middle six player, but that's not quite the level that I think the Jets are really needing to add to this team. He'll absolutely play a role for the squad and potentially, maybe one day, earns his way up to the second line, but that's, again, asking a lot for one guy. Salamonson might have your highest ceiling, and he's on the back end, right? The Jets really need forward help up front. They need elite scoring talent. They need elite talent of any kind, really. And the only way that you're going to be able to get that is from the draft. And I think the Jets have generally drafted pretty well. So if they can find a way to turn Stanley into a package of assets that gets them a deeper pool, a better future, you have to do it. Re-signing him is a mistake. Like, I like him. He's a nice guy, but he is not the player that you want to commit a lot of money to. You've spent a lot of time already. It is time to, cut your losses and turn his really hot season into something better for the team and the future. And I know a lot of Jets fans will be upset about that, but this is the kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where we cannot get married to players in the same way that, we might have done in previous years. The Jets are entering a new time of transition. This is the moment where you have a chance to completely change the identity of a franchise that has been very good in the regular season, but has found every sort of barrier when it comes to the playoffs. This is your chance to try and change that. This is an opportunity that the Jets cannot pass up, and I am very worried that they're not going to react to it the right way. If they are seriously talking extension with Stanley, I think they are out to lunch and they're missing the bigger picture. I know a lot of people want me to, move on beyond the tanking narrative and stuff, but you can't look at the short term. This sport really, on the one hand operates in very short time scales, but on the other hand, you have to think about the longer term picture. And if you commit to this stuff already right now, you are limiting whatever future you may have. But obviously there's a lot for the Jets to figure out. And part of that has, left me very puzzled as to what's going on with the Moose, right? I've talked about there being some depth pieces down there, but the Moose are not playing very well. And I want to chat about what's going on with them coming right up. There's nothing like being near the ice during hockey season. The speed, the hits, the atmosphere. It's unmatched. Watching at home is great, but being in the building is a completely different experience. The only thing that used to get in the way was actually getting tickets. Long queues, endless screens, and prices changing at checkout. That's why the Gametime app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NHL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I've used Gametime to buy Ravens playoff tickets. I got to see a panoramic view of my seat, which was fantastic. I knew what I was getting. I knew where I was sitting. It felt really nice. And the app actually showed me the best value seat in the stadium relative to the quality of the seat and the price. It was fantastic. And you know what? When I bought that ticket, all of my prices and fees were shown up front. No surprise charges, no hidden fees, no monkey business. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we're talking about the Jets' future. And, I just mentioned, the Jets really have to trade Stanley at this upcoming trade deadline, or even before then. He could, command a massive haul. But amidst that, I also was talking a little bit about the Jets' young players and youth. I spotlighted a few of them on yesterday's episode, potentially being closer to making the jump. But I've got a real problem with this team right now in the whole. And I look at the Manitoba Moose, and this is supposed to be your big graduating proving grounds. You look at the Moose roster, and they are like vastly underperforming expectations. Manitoba went through one of the biggest roster overhauls we've ever seen with the Moose in years. And I was really high on it. I was really impressed with the work that both the Jets and the Moose front offices did to try and get this team in order. Bringing in DiGiuseppe, Fagemo, Dewar, this is a lot of money to spend on this team. And you look at the results and the roster performances, and they have been nowhere near expectation. They're third in the Central, which doesn't sound bad until you look at the rest of the divisions out there. Third place, the lowest other third place team has 41 points. The Moose are sitting at 31, at 37. Most other teams in third place have about 6 to 7 more standings points than the Moose do. And you look at the Central Division in particular, this division is not particularly good. The 4, 5, and 6 seeds are all a little bit lower than most of the other divisions. And so the Moose, kind of by virtue of being in this division, find themselves in an elevated position where if they were in any other division, quite literally any other division, they'd really be not in a playoff spot right now. They'd be just hovering around the 5 seed and certainly within touching distance, but really not in a particularly good position to actually make it. So obviously, the 5th position does technically make it for a lot of these teams, but I think it'd be a very tenuous one for the Moose. And you look at this Moose squad and sort of the offensive production. As a team, they've scored like 91 goals, which is lower than pretty much every other division leader out there. They've conceded almost as many as some of the worst teams in, say the North Division or even the Bridge or even in the Atlantic Division. This Moose squad is really, really bad, and it shouldn't be, because the amount of support that was provided to them to get this offense back on track, to get this roster back on track, it is baffling that they have so little to show for it. You look at Fagemo, who has been, a 40 or 50 point AHL guy the last few years. He is pacing for like maybe 25 or 30. On the whole, it's rough. I'm being a little bit facetious. It's probably closer to like 35 points that he's on pace for, but it's pretty grim, for a guy who has been, upwards of 50, maybe even closer to 60 points. He's really looked like a shell of himself. DiGiuseppe, a Calder Cup winner with Abbotsford, and not really looking that impressive with Manitoba's offense. The way that the Moose roll a lot of their lines, they tend to be, I guess, deployed relatively evenly. And so, you don't have the same kind of strategy or specific matchups or emphasis on young star talent. And then the way that the line combinations are sometimes formed, you see a lot of the grindier vets on one line, you've got the kids on another line, and it's just kind of like, what is going on down there, man? Like, who is actually running the show? And Morrison, I've never really been sold on. I continue to feel like he's just not the guy for the Jets. Manitoba was given all of this investment in part because the rumor was prospects like Lambert were really faltering. And that hasn't changed. Like Lambert is towards the bottom of the team's scoring ranks. Chibrikov is as well. Barlow has looked completely stagnant. This is a real problem for Winnipeg. They need these prospects to actually show some level of pro success. And you look at Lambert's first year, he was one of the top rookies in the whole AHL. How could he go from that to this, over the span of a season or so? This Moose team is not being managed properly. And, I'm sure the Chaz Lucius thing that, Chevy said a couple of weeks ago probably didn't go over big with the Moose front office. I'm sure they did not appreciate feeling like they were thrown under the bus. And the way that they're being run right now, I feel like there has to be some kind of a change, right? If I was the Jets front office, I'd be looking at Manitoba's overall performance and asking what they're doing down there. It just doesn't feel like there is congruency in this whole draft and develop model that Winnipeg is supposedly committed to when we're not really seeing many of these prospects performing at a level that gets you promoted. Even Zhilkin, for his call up, he was pacing at half a point per game-ish or a little bit under. Not super crazy, right? And for a Moose team that has this much firepower on paper, it's not good enough. And, I have serious concerns about what this is going to do when it comes to the trade deadline. These are players and prospects that are supposed to either help your team improve in-house, right? Or you use them to find support from outside. And right now the Jets are getting neither. Winnipeg has very clearly shown that they do not trust most of the Moose players to come up to Winnipeg and actually help this team. They keep signing veterans. They keep blocking the kids. They do not think that what they have on their farm system is good enough to support the big club. So what the heck are we doing here then? Why are the Moose being run into the ground like this? And, if this continues, Manitoba's playoff stint, which, they are likely to make the playoffs. They're third in the division. I would be surprised if they slip below some of these crappier teams. But it just, they're going to have a very short run. Like, this team got humiliated in their first several games of the season. And, yes, they've pulled together some better results the past few weeks, but you look at how they're actually scoring, who they're beating up on, and who's kind of lit them up. And it's just, you see a clear talent and skill and coaching differential that should not exist. This Moose team should be one of the top performers in the whole AHL. And at best, you look at where they are league-wide, it's really, really not that impressive. They are, as of right now, they are like 19th out of 32 teams, which is really just not that good. Not for what Manitoba was given, not for what the Jets have spent on improving this team. And they are, in a division with the class of the whole league. Grand Rapids is fantastic. They've only lost, including overtime losses and shootout losses, 5 games on the whole season out of 38 that they've already played, or 34 that they've already played. So, I just think there are serious questions that need to be asked of what the Moose are doing and how they're being operated. And I don't know that conversation is necessarily happening. We really haven't heard any sort of dissatisfaction from the Jets front office with what this season has been. So all that to say, I really am concerned. I think this is a much bigger thing than people have necessarily honed in on. I don't really see a lot of people talking about the Moose lack of success, but this is a really critical moment when, the Jets are relying on this future core that they're trying to build, and the kids that are coming through this system are hitting some kind of a pro wall. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if it's just the coaching in Manitoba that's the issue, or if there's some deeper developmental and organizational problem, but they have got to sort this out fast. This cannot be, a stopping point for a lot of these kids, because otherwise, what is the point of drafting them, right? If they get to the Moose and they just completely flame out for the most part, and you're only maybe getting 1 or 2 players every few seasons, that's not good enough. This Jets team needs more support from their prospect and depth ranks, and having this be, a bit of a stifling moment for any of their kids is just a disaster. So hopefully the Jets can sort this out. The Moose being this rough, despite the investment given to them, it's just not acceptable. And I think for a Jets team that is likely to add some really big prospects coming through, you want to trust that they're in good hands. And right now, I don't think we have that feeling at all. I don't know about you, but I'm looking at this Moose squad and I'm feeling like, if anything, I'd rather the Jets prospects just skip it and move straight to the big club because they are not going to get anything out of the AHL. But would be curious to know your thoughts on this. Have you watched the Moose? What stands out about this team to you? We'll chat about that throughout the year and check in with the Moose kids over the next few months. But the Jets themselves have a big game coming up. They've got a date and a rematch with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Good Lord. Toronto has kind of been all over the place, a lot like the Jets in many ways. They are, obviously in a weird position. They've started to turn their recent form around, but yeah, they are still outside of the playoffs as of right now. So we'll talk about what to expect from a very unpredictable Toronto Maple Leafs team coming right up. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. You'll see this pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like the most. Maybe you're a Caleb Williams fan and watching him just do his QB fourth quarter magic BS that he seemingly conjures every single game. I don't know how the dude does it, but he keeps doing it. And if you think that he is the one to potentially hoist a Super Bowl trophy for Chicago of all teams, this is your chance to get in on the action. These profit boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel bigger that way too. You can make your picks and apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. If you've ever hired somebody who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how damaging that can be. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed's sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've been looking for work in previous years, and I can personally attest to Indeed's resume builder being comprehensive. It matched my work experience, it showed me salary requirements, and gave me a whole host of jobs that were perfect matches for my skill set. And according to Indeed's data, sponsored jobs posts lead directly to 90% more hires compared to other non-sponsored job posts. It's a great way to find folks who match what you need. And if you want to spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results, use Indeed's sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are prepping for Winnipeg versus Toronto. Yeah, this is going to be a battle of mid, is how I would gently describe it. And the last time the Jets faced this Leafs team, we had a really embarrassing implosion where, what was it? The Jets were up like 5-2 or something and then lost, 6-5? It was crazy. And like this Leafs team has taken hits themselves, right? They're also outside of the playoffs. They've won a fair few games as of late, so they've been in better form. They did just lose to Vegas in overtime, so I'm sure they're kind of pissed about that. But this Leafs team, ever since Marner left, it's just not been the same, right? Up front, they're going to have McMahon, Matthews, and Domi, Michelli, Tavares, and Nylander, and then Nees, Waugh, and Robertson, likely Lorentz, Lawton, and Cowan on the fourth line. I mean, it's not a bad team on paper. It looks all right. The forward grouping, it's not great. I think the thing that really stands out is like you've got McMahon, Matthews, and Domi on a line, and like one of those guys to me feels like a first liner. Everyone else, I wouldn't really necessarily have up there. But I'm sure, Toronto's trying to spread the wealth. Offensively, I think they've had some issues with, getting consistent scoring out of this top nine. Like, it's a solid group, but it's not anything special. And the blue line has kind of been not fantastic. Troy Stetcher's probably been one of the highlights, but I keep seeing Morgan Riley getting cooked on all these goals, so that can't be great. But on the defense, they've got Riley and Carlo together, McCabe and Stetcher on the second, and then Ekman Larson and Myers on the third. The loss of Chris Tanna for most of the year is going to be really rough, and it also opens the door for Toronto to make a really big desperation play. I keep seeing Luke Schenn linked in Toronto, so just keep an eye out for that. Luke Schenn going to the Leafs would be like pure comedy for me. But for Schenn, it would be, going home, right? He was starting out his career as a Leaf. He'd be going back. And if Toronto does this, they would probably try and also get Braden Schenn. We saw a lot of conversation about the Schenn brothers potentially reuniting on some team. And Toronto could make a lot of sense, right? Braden would be a center upgrade for their top nine. It would give, maybe a chance for Waugh to slide back to the fourth line. You get Matthews, Tavares, and Schenn. I don't know if I would call that great necessarily, but it's better. It's better, I guess. Or maybe Schenn slides into a wing position. I have no clue how they want to do this. I don't really care about the Leafs, so I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about them. But this team is probably at its most beatable that it's been in some years. So for the Jets, if they're serious about trying to continue this win streak, I mean, you could probably come away with a point or two and feel at least like you've beaten the Leafs. For the Jets, I don't really expect too many changes. Salomonson's probably going to be on the second pairing. Will be interesting to see if Nyquist maybe draws in. He's been riding Pine, and, it's kind of hard to argue against it. Pearson has scored a goal or two recently, and he's looked pretty lively. So I don't know who else would really come out, right? Most of the Jets depth players have been doing the necessary, and Nyquist has kind of been the odd man out for much of the season. So I think Winnipeg will come back with most of the same lineup. We'll have to see if they also put in, more minutes for Schenn against Toronto. Do they try and pump his tires, I guess, to the team that's most likely to acquire him? I really don't know. But I think the Schenn trade to Toronto is probably coming sooner than later, if that is the one that materializes. Maybe some other team wants to take a flyer on Luke, but I think it's probably going to be the Leafs. And let's see what the Jets can squeeze out of Toronto. A desperate Leafs team that needs to make the postseason and try and make good on its current promise could potentially be conned into doing something really silly. So would love to hear your thoughts on this. Message me at HLivingLoco on Twitter and at LO_Winnipeg Jets there as well. Or, post in the comments below what you think of the potential Schenn trade to Toronto. But that'll be it for tonight's episode. We'll see you this coming week with some more hot content. Monday, we'll recap what happened against Toronto and see if there's any fun takeaways, and also hopefully get to talk a little bit more about Elias Salomonson's performance. But that's all the time that we have for tonight. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.